Welcome back to another installment of This or That Movies. In this series, I pit two movies against each other and force my journalist colleagues to reveal whether they agree with the public opinion or not. I am Jeanette, an entertainment journalist and critic, and this is my friend Hannah, also an entertainment journalist and critic. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Jeanette. I'm excited to talk about this James Wan double feature.
Is it a James Wan double feature or a Patrick Wilson double feature? Like, let's be real.
That's true. Yeah. He does all the heavy lifting.
So today, as Hannah hinted, we are comparing two James Wan / Patrick Wilson movies, The Conjuring 2013 versus Insidious 2010. So as is the norm around here, I've gathered some data that I will use to declare an audience favorite. This includes critical reception, audience scores, and box office profits. After we are continuing with our new format, we'll be grading it for our rewatchability / enjoyment. A, acting, T, theme / story, and E is for effects. But before I unveil the audience favorite, Hannah, do you have any guesses as to which of these movies is more popular among the general public?
I'm pretty confident it's The Conjuring. I'm gonna have to say it's a little bit of a cheat in that I've written about the Conjuring series specifically before, and so I have like some idea at least of the box office, which I know is like pretty substantial, like pretty bananas. So like going off of that, I feel like it'd be difficult for Insidious to compete, and the amount of Conjuring films, not just like the main Conjuring series, but the spin-offs like The Nun and Annabelle. I feel like at least like sort of, yeah, like based on the box office at least, it's probably going to be The Conjuring. But yeah, I'm curious to hear whether my spidey senses are correct.
Your spidey senses are correct. Yeah, The Conjuring beats out Insidious in every category. So it's got an 86% in Rotten Tomatoes versus Insidious's 66%. IMDb, it's got a 7.5 versus 6.8. Letterboxd, it also scores higher with a 3.8 versus a 3.2. And then, yeah, box office, you nailed it. Insidious only has 54 million, which, like, to say only about 54 million sounds crazy, but versus The Conjuring's 137 million in the US. It obviously beats it out worldwide as well. So yeah, for the purpose of this, The Conjuring is definitely the audience favorite. And it makes sense. I think like The Conjuring being based on a true story definitely probably helped put butts in seats.
It's interesting as well because Insidious came out first, I believe, like only by a couple of years, but you can kind of like see the building blocks like for The Conjuring in Insidious, I think. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I think they both like, yeah, because it's 2010 versus 2013, and it was that time in movies too where like both of these movies, I think, aesthetically kind of look very similar. They have that like grayscale saturation that like was very popular and kind of is still popular in horror, although I think we're kind of seeing like a shift away from that a bit, especially in like indie projects. You're getting more like saturated, like Suspiria-esque color palettes. But yeah, I agree with you. I think The Conjuring definitely took some things from Insidious. I mean, it makes sense. They're both James Wan. He's got a style. He's got a brand. I think you and I both know it pretty well. So like it tracks. Although he did something very different in Malignant, I think.
Yes, I think, yeah, Malignant is probably my favorite of his films. I think it's weirdly underrated. I think like it's a future cult classic, I think, and I'm sure that like if you know like already, but like I feel like it didn't quite find the audience that it should have had when it came out. Like I think it's his most like ambitious. I think it's one of his weirdest. And the tone was like, I think it almost took itself slightly too seriously for people to kind of watch it with that sort of like, oh, it's like a campy, like kind of schlocky B movie thing.
Yeah.
But then like it didn't like lean into that like enough for people to also like go the other way on it. It could have gone one way or the other, but I like mostly just watch it as like almost like a comedy, like a comedy movie, like The Pope's Exorcist. It has that like you're just watching it and you're like, this is just silly and fun. It's like being on the like a ghost train or something. Like it is just like stupid, and I love that about it. And the plot is absolutely batshit, and yeah.
No, for real. I loved it too. And I was surprised when it came out, it was so divisive, because I think, like you said, like the people that got it. And then everyone else was kind of like, what is this? But like, I actually loved it. And I watched it I watched that one with my mom. She loved it too. Like, I was really surprised by the people that didn't. But I think there were so many influences of other movies in that you kind of had to have like a background in horror to truly appreciate a lot of like the references and like editing choices and cinematography choices. But really good movie. But I don't want to, we'll have to do this and that on Malignant versus like something at some point. I have to think about something that I could pair with, because that would be really fun.
Yeah, it's a tough. Yeah, I don't know what the sort of it's kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde story. There must be something, but yeah, it would be difficult to compare it to anything because it is so weird and unique. Yeah.
It is. But we will move into the movies we are here to talk about. So segment 1, rewatchability / enjoyment. Like,
if I start with Insidious, I think it is like a kind of like middle of the road, like because I have rewatched it like a few times. I rewatched it like over the weekend ahead of this, because I've probably accumulatively seen it a lot less, I think, since it came out than The Conjuring and most of the other Conjuring movies. It is rewatchable, but I think it's quite reliant on, I guess, like sort of plot twists in a way that I don't think The Conjuring necessarily is. It does lose a lot of its effect like the second or third like sort of time around, particularly the ending, because the ending is like a gotcha like kind of moment. And I still really like that as an ending. Like it's really bold. The scares like drastically like sort of diminish, I think, in their effect like after the first like sort of time, whereas The Conjuring, it feels a lot more solid, and I feel like you're not just watching it for the scares, which I think do actually remain effective, like even after having watched it like 2, 3, maybe even 4 times. I think the cinematography is stronger. I suppose I was going to mention the acting. That's another category, isn't it? I feel like the you get a lot more invested in the family, and in terms of it, like sort of invested in a mythology being built, and invested in the Warrens' relationship and what like an unusual partnership they have in terms of this like sort of real life or semi-real life ghost sort of married couple, I think.
I have not, aside from like reviewing it a bit before talking to you, I have never rewatched Insidious since it came out, and I don't think I watched any of like the installments past 2. I didn't connect with Insidious. I do agree with you that like it is definitely one of those movies that's like best enjoyed on first viewing, and I think once you know the twist, it's like it's good. It's still a well-made movie, and I know Insidious definitely has like really passionate fans, but I think it loses some of that like oomph once you, especially if you watch the later installments too and kind of know what happens, and how they kind of like retcon some of the things that happen in that. I think with like Elaine, I do love The Conjuring. I have seen The Conjuring like dozens of times since it came out. It came out at a time when I was like really hungry for like good horror, and I think that for whatever reason, The Conjuring just like hit that for me. I thought it, like you said, the cinematography is great. It's well acted. The story isn't as reliant on twists. It's more of like a standard like haunted house story, but we get this kind of unique element of Ed and Lorraine's like, yeah, semi real, like unique, bizarre relationship. And I think the pacing is really good in The Conjuring. I think like even the later Conjuring installments, which I don't love quite as much, I think they really excel at kind of like that slow burn horror, and they do a really nice build up with the scares. And I think that's one of my favorite things about the original Conjuring, is kind of like not necessarily even when it gets really wild and crazy at the end. It's like the ride there. I almost like more than when I get to the ride, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you actually. Yeah, the pacing really like works better. I think Insidious has a lot of like kind of little peaks and troughs, and so like by the time you get to the big like sort of climax, which I don't think the payoff is as good, apart from that like ending sting.
Yes.
Oh no, Patrick Wilson's he's got when he goes into I nearly called it the sunken place, but that's in Get Out. It's the further, isn't it?
The further, yep.
Which I really like. I love that idea of going into like this other realm and stuff. I think that was like something that made Insidious stand out from other like kind of possession and sort of haunted house like sort of stuff, because it gets like a bit more fantastical, I think. And it's cool like sort of seeing Patrick Wilson like sort of navigate in that like sort of world. But when he actually finds his son, he seems to rescue him relatively easily. Like I thought like you're expecting like a bit more of a showdown with the lipstick Darth Maul. It is a little bit of a fake out so that you can have the sting at the end, whereas what The Conjuring builds to with it's Lily Taylor, is that her name?
It is Lily Taylor, yes. I almost wanted to say Lily Tomlin. I'm like, no, wrong person.
Can you imagine Lily Tomlin? And
it would be great.
I would love to see Lily Tomlin in like a possession movie. That would be so funny. Yeah, like the build up to Lily Taylor's like possession by the witch in the basement is just like one like sort of like however long the sequence is, like 5 or 10 minutes long of just this like intense like spiritual physical tour de force like sort of happening, which I think like is like much more psychologically it like hits you more than just like Insidious. I think it the scares are a little more fleeting, like a little bit more like sort of relying on the shock and the like loud noise and then a thing flashes on the screen, like whereas the Conjuring scares like sort of like really get under your skin a lot more and kind of stay in your brain afterwards. Yeah,
it definitely a movie if like, you know, because I'm known as the spooky person, and so if I have friends over and they're like, oh Jeanette, like let's watch a horror movie, you know, and they're not super into the genre, like this is a great movie I think to put on, where it's like a little bit scary but it's not going to be like traumatizing. I'm not going to be like, oh hey, let's like start with like Terrifier 3 or something. Like it's you know, I think it really does a nice job of like bridging the gap between like, you know, genre newbies and like horror veterans. I think like almost anyone can enjoy this movie to an extent, like if horror is your thing. So yeah, but I think this is a good transition to go into segment 2 for acting. And spoiler alert, I already know that Hannah is like a huge Patrick Wilson stan, so prepare yourself for some Patrick Wilson love. It's really important.
To the point where like when I was going to see the most recent Conjuring movie, Last Rites, I was like genuinely looking at like Patrick Wilson like t-shirts on Etsy. You know, there's like a cheesy montage of like the person's face and that like big like sort of graffiti like text. I was like, oh, this would be hilarious. Rock up to the cinema in this, but
I'm disappointed you didn't pull the trigger on that.
Yeah, especially because that's probably the last one he's gonna do, I think. But we'll see. Yeah, I'm sure the paychecks are very persuasive. But no, I love Patrick Wilson. I think him and James Wan are like a match made in heaven. I prefer him in the Conjuring films, I think, but it's not necessarily a performance thing as much as it is. I just think that Ed is just a character who you prefer to spend more time with. Like I'm struggling to even remember the name of his character in the Insidious films other than the dad.
Yeah, we will call him Dad from here on out.
Dad, Insidious Dad. And he's fine in it. He's completely charming. There's like a little moment in it towards the start where him and Rose Byrne, again, can't remember her character name, I'll just call her Rose Byrne. They're like sort of getting ready for bed, and he like it's a really tiny detail but like he puts on like, I think it's like an anti-wrinkle cream just around his eyes, and then just like gets into bed. And for some reason I was like, I like that choice, because you don't normally see men doing that kind of thing. And
Yeah,
it kind of like just nails like what stage of life that particular character is in. And yeah, just little things like that. And he always just comes across as being like great with like kids and stuff. He's obviously like good at playing these kind of like family orientated, like, you know, like America's Dad, like.
Yeah.
But I think he excels at Ed because there is a little touch more of the sort of the campiness, I think, that we talked about, like that is like dialed up to like 100 in Malignant, and I think the Conjuring films have like just enough of it. And the Warrens, because they're these like sort of extremely heightened versions of who they are in, or who they were in real life. I think that like when Patrick as Ed is in full like exorcism mode, I am literally like, I'm not a believer, but I will come to Jesus for this. Like, he sells it so well. And I think the period setting probably helps as well. He's like, you know, how John Hamm in Mad Men just looks completely like he's from that time. I think that Patrick Wilson does like suit like being in like that like kind of mid-century like kind of setting. But should probably talk about someone other than him. And I yeah, so yeah, I think I adore Rose Byrne. I have yet to watch her in any film and not been completely entranced by her. Absolutely loved her recently in If I Had Legs I'd Kick You. It's incredible if you haven't watched it. Just like, yeah, she's amazing. I think she's like completely fine again in Insidious. It's not, she doesn't really have a lot to do other than be the sort of like hysterical crying mother, but she does a fine job at that. But I think, yeah, like Vera Familia, love her as Lorraine. Her and Patrick Wilson, just the chemistry is the glue that makes the Conjuring films work, I think, like more than anything else. Like they just have incredible chemistry together. But I think that Lily Taylor is like the scene stealer of the Conjuring. And like, yeah, when I mentioned before about when she goes like full possession, it's an incredible, it's like, it's such an unhinged performance, but she manages to not like tip it over into like parody. Like it would be very easy to like overact that to the point of like you end up just sort of laughing at her, but she fully sells like that like kind of feral, like I have become a beast. I'm no longer like a human mother, I'm this like monster. And like you said, like the build up and the pacing to it completely works as well. So yeah, I think yeah, The Conjuring probably easily, I think, outdoes Insidious on this category.
Yeah, I also love Patrick Wilson. I think he's great. Like you said, he is kind of like America's Dad. And I think in Insidious, him and Rose Byrne kind of, yeah, they're just like you said, we don't even remember their names. They're like mom and dad. And it's like, they're not bad, but I don't think there's like anything particularly special happening in that movie. I honestly think that the woman that plays Elise, Lynn Shay, who I think she does a really good job. She's got a really interesting role. She kind of comes in. She's like the Lorraine of that movie.
Yeah.
She's like sweet. She's kind of innocent, but she's got like, I don't know, there's like this like darkness in her. I think there's like that really underrated scene in Insidious where she goes into the room with the boy and she looks at the ceiling and kind of starts describing the demon with her an artist, like a sketch artist.
He's like a police sketch artist, but like a demon sketch artist, which is really cool actually. It's a really like cool idea, I think, that I've not really seen, because we all know like it's him and like the guy who does all the tech stuff, and we're like, we know that all the like what are they called, like electroplasm, it's not electroplasm but they're trying to like electro something or other. But, yeah, the sketch artist, and then he also like writes down everything Elise says in the film, where for some reason she's wearing that weird like gas mask and they're like communicating. I don't know gas mask, but it works because it's scary. They also have a really weird chemistry. They kind of hate each other. Strange, but yeah. No,
I think that's a fun scene.
And that you're right, like I think that is Elise's like standout scene, I think, because you fully believe that it's that like thing where she's like looking straight at the demon and you can tell that she desperately wants to look away but she can't. Really works. Yeah,
she does a great job with like those like micro expressions. You totally believe she's seeing something, you know, otherworldly. And I think that scene in general, not only is she really selling the scene, but I like those types of scenes where it's like, what, because we don't see the demon, you know, the way she does. We're in the same position as everyone else in that room. And I think it's sort of like the Jaws effect, right? It's like showing you're not actually seeing the horror. You're like, your mind is filling in the blanks. And then, you know, when we do see the demon, it is Darth Maul. So it's almost like I like the build up to the scene. I think that's where James Wan can like really excel in both of these movies. So for me, I think Elise in a lot of ways is the standout of Insidious. And I mean, that kind of tracks. She's kind of become like the face of the franchise, from my understanding. Every time, you know, Insidious chapter 72 comes out, it's like Elise on the cover. So Conjuring, like you, I think Lily Taylor is like the standout. She's so believable. Like I really feel like she helps ground this movie and this family. I think the family is so much more likable in The Conjuring, and they do a great job. I love the little details of them all like sleeping in the living room together. And even the scene where she first meets Ed and Lorraine and Lily Taylor's like walking them through the house and like explaining, you know, oh, the picture fell down and oh, this happened. And yeah, we have to shut the doors because it knocks 3 times. It just feels so real. Like, I feel like I'm almost like watching this like documentary in a sense, and I'm just watching. She doesn't overact, like you said, because it could turn into a parody, especially when she becomes fully possessed later, but she just sells it. And I also always like to shout out Joey King in this movie, because I think she's the strongest actor of the children. She does a really good job. She's really believable. And obviously Vera Farmiga, I mean, she is like, I love her. She's great. And her and Ed, I mean, like, it's hard to play people that are based on real people. I think they're definitely heightened versions. Like, they come in like matching outfits. Like, they look so hot. Their chemistry is great. They're definitely like, yeah, fan fiction Ed and Lorraine Warren. And I think their chemistry really sells it. Conjuring 1 is, I think, like my favorite version of Ed and Lorraine. Like, I think in the later ones, like especially in 3, The Devil Made Me Do It or whatever, I remember being like, is this a horror movie or a love story? Because those two were like running through the hallway, like kissing on the mouth, like true love's kiss can break the spell. And I'm like, what's happening? What has this turned into?
Last Rites, I don't know if you've watched that, the most recent one, I think is even more that. Like, it is just like a whole like tribute to the Ed and Lorraine love story. Oh, and there's also like a haunted mirror, don't worry about it. Like,
great way to that's the official synopsis. Okay, so moving on, segment 3, theme and story.
Theme. To me, the Conjuring films, like from this first one, and then as we said, like going like even stronger into the later ones, like they are really about like the power of love over fear, like and like sort of strong like kind of family bond. They're like very I was gonna say like subtly Christian religious, but I don't think it's subtle at all actually. But
yeah, maybe a different adjective.
the opposite of subtle, like just hitting you over the head with a crucifix a little bit, which is it's not out of place, because obviously
right.
they're drawing on like that like whole theology, so completely get it, but it is all about like, without like explicitly saying it's the power of believing in God over the devil, like that is essentially what they are basically selling you. You could say something similar-ish about Insidious, although I wouldn't say that that is particularly religious. It's much more, other than there being a demon who never really gets a name, I don't think. I think we only ever know them as like the lipstick demon, and normally they like some like kind of a biblical name, and this one doesn't, and so Insidious like feels like weirdly kind of distant from that like kind of stuff, and they don't like, it's not a case of like doing like an exorcism or something, like it's more of a case of like going into this other world and like pulling a spirit free. So yeah, I'm sort of struggling to like hit upon exactly what the message of Insidious is. The only thing I can really think of is the whole like sort of inherited like kind of generational. I feel like saying generational trauma is like so hackneyed these days because it's like such a thing, particularly in horror.
Yeah.
Not that it isn't like an interesting thing to explore, and obviously these movies would have came out like at a time where it wasn't as a thing. But because like sort of Patrick Wilson had this like sort of astral projection ability when he was a kid, and then he's like kind of seemingly passed it on to his oldest son, I think he is. So I suppose like there's this kind of like loose idea in there of like sort of like the things that you could pass on to your children, for better or worse, because it's like it's an ability that's like could be quite like sort of positive, like all the sketches of him like sort of flying as like a Superman like kind of character, and it's like, oh yeah, it is like a cool ability, but then he gets like easily like sort of manipulated and like sucked into this like sort of dark like kind of world, I guess. So there's like that, but that's probably me like sort of really looking for something. I think Insidious is like a lot more surface level, like it's just a spooky story with some like supernaturally psychic things that go bump in the night, kind of thing, and that's probably why it's not as rewatchable. Whereas The Conjuring, like that like sort of the messages of like the strength of the family unit and the sort of that like underlying like broad ideas of like love overpowering fear and hate are very strong, and it's the building blocks of like a mythology which gets like very well mined for spin-offs and the future installments. Like it is a world that you want to return to, particularly the introduction of the nun, which is like like a really interesting like sort of like subplot to thread in, and then obviously gets like more explored in the second one. And the Ed and Lorraine's like weird little museum in their house as well, where they have all the cursed objects, which I think you see in this one. Or is it the second?
I'm
trying to remember now.
I think you do see it definitely in the second, because that's like it's a big deal in that. But I think when it starts, we like see them and they walk through, because we see Annabelle in this one, right?
Oh, yeah. And so there is this like there are these little teases of like, oh, they have like a history and they'll have a future, and so I think
the multiverse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, once again, I think the film that comes out on top is quite clearly The Conjuring. I think the story and the themes like being that much more interesting and deeper makes it have like more of a shelf life, I think, and so I rest my case.
I mean, that was a very persuasive argument. Interestingly, which I didn't think this, but I think I'm gonna put Insidious slightly higher than you. I do agree that it is like very surface level, like in regards to theme. I think, like you said, you could make the generational trauma argument because you can do that for almost any horror movie. Yeah. I think, but I think we're like, as far as its story, and you kind of touched on this earlier, I think Insidious has like unique, like it really is more into the lore, like of building its world. It introduces the concept of the further and the astral projection, and like even having the demon sketch artist. Like, how many movies do you see with a demon sketch artist? Come on. So I think it does some like interesting things that make it unique. I can't really think of a movie that feels or covers the kind of ground that Insidious does the same way. Whereas like The Conjuring, I am gonna rate The Conjuring higher, but I think like The Conjuring is less unique in a certain sense because we very much have seen movies like The Conjuring before, instance, even looking at like something like Amityville, even, which is of course also related to the Warrens. But so for that reason, I think I'm giving Insidious props for its like world building. I think it did some interesting things, even though I adamantly hate anything that has to do with astral projection.
Really?
It's just not for me. I think it's corny. I'm sorry if it's your thing. But again, The Conjuring definitely relies on tropes and kind of covers a lot of ground that other haunted house movies have done, but it does so more entertainingly and more like believably and realistically. And I think, like you said, The Conjuring definitely makes sure you know its themes. It is essentially about like love and faith conquering evil, which again isn't necessarily unique to this movie. Like something like The Exorcist also did that very well. But yeah, The Conjuring makes sure you know it. Like, yeah, to quote you, they hit you over the head with a crucifix. I mean, they're like strangling you with a rosary beads and making sure. Did you see it? This is what it's about. But it just does it so fun and so classy. So yeah, Conjuring for me is the better one.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go into segment 4, our last segment, effects. How are you rating like special effects, practical effects, whatever effects you want to talk about?
I suppose Insidious technically has a slight disadvantage in that it's ever so slightly the older film, only by 3 years, but like with the rate that like effects, particularly digital effects, like improve and have improved, I feel like since like the 99 2000, like that can make a huge amount of difference. James Wan's films is like, I'm not an expert, but they do appear to always be like a really good blend of like practical and digital, like, and a lot of time it is like someone in a creepy costume. Like obviously the nun like is like, she is there in that like terrifying costume, which I noticed actually on my rewatch for this, that the actress who plays the nun, I believe her name is Bonnie Aarons, it does show up in Insidious. It's uncredited, but she's like, you know, that weird like doll faced family who like they're in like sort of period dress, and like one of them like shoots the others on like a sofa. She's like the sort of the mother figure of those. You see her face a couple of times, and I was like, Bonnie Aarons has such a distinctive.
Yeah.
The nun like is like very close to her actual face, and I was like, oh my god, it's her.
Yeah. Cheekbones for days. That woman. She is. Yeah.
Days, that amazing like nose. Yeah. And I was like, oh, interesting. And I didn't look into it, but obviously James Wan must have like like also saw the potential in that face and was like, Bonnie Aaron's. But I digress.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think Insidious is, again, you've got the sort of the more like kind of realism of The Conjuring versus the like Insidious is a little more fantastical. So I think you are probably more aware and notice the sort of the effects in Insidious a lot more. And I really love the like simplicity of like when Patrick Wilson like travels in to the further like it is like initially it is just literally just him in this like black like void, and that is always just instantly terrifying. Like it always used to be like one of the like most interesting parts I thought of like Stranger Things, like whenever Eleven is in her little sort of whatever it is, her like little psychic void, and he just like sort of is like making his way through it. You can sort of hear and see like sort of glimpses of stuff, and then he eventually reaches like that mirrored like sort of version of his house. Like the red door as well, I think is the most like sort of striking like piece of imagery I think from Insidious, and I think it was the title of the most recent film as well. Like I think it was literally called The Red Door. Yeah, so I think like environmentally Insidious is way more interesting, particularly in those like kinds of moments. There are bits I think when a lot of the sort of the other like kind of spirits do look a little Universal horror, people in makeup.
Yeah.
Yeah, like just a little too much. Like when they're sort of like shadowy and kind of in the distance, you don't really notice it like as much, but there is a little bit of like, yeah, this is just a man with like some charcoal on his face or something. Just a bit. Like that's probably my like main criticism of it. I do think they do a pretty good job with like the old woman who like latches on to Patrick Wilson, like does look like pretty terrifying. And I think the effects are probably at their best, I think, from what I remember, in like the scene we briefly touched upon, like where they're doing that sort of seance and Elise is in that weird mask, and like they have that like sort of there's the sort of the thing of like the camera flashes like going off every so often, and then the like demon sketch artist is like furiously like sort of writing the stuff down. And I think that like that's like a scene where like everything is working like on every sort of level, like the cinematography, the lighting, the direction, the acting, like them being like thrown around the room and stuff. Like it's a really well done version of those like kinds of seance-y scenes which we've seen done like loads and loads of times. I think The Conjuring, the effects in it are like mostly a lot more like subtle but still like really effective. Like one of the scenes that always like sticks with me the most is when I think it's Lorraine is like hanging laundry outside, and then like that sheet like sort of blows and it suddenly catches on like a figure that isn't there, and like that is one of the freakiest moments. And it's quite like, I say it's quite like a simple effect. I'm sure it was probably very difficult to actually, like if they actually had like someone physically standing there.
Yeah, because it is all one shot. Because that's one of my favorite scenes too. And then it like blows up onto the window, and then the figure appears. But they don't cut from like the sheet being on the person to the window. But it does look. It has like a practical element to it, and so I too am always like, how did they do this so well? It is a really creepy. I love a creepy laundry hanging scene.
Yeah, that's such a specific trope, but yeah, it does.
It is. It happens a lot. Halloween.
Yeah. Something terrifying about going out and hanging your laundry up. Yeah. Yeah. So it is a little bit difficult to compare them. I think. I think they're like, yeah, like I said, overall, like Insidious might be slightly like seem like it's more effects heavy and kind of like flashier, I suppose. And The Conjuring is like more like a little more subtle. like it's probably at its least subtle when like I remember there's that scene where the witch is like appears like on the ceiling above Lily Taylor and just like vomits directly into her mouth, which I think is like the moment of a possession. And if that was real liquid, it must have been pretty gross for Lily Taylor. There's nothing in either of them that really made me go, wow, they're really like pushing things like sort of forward on like a technical level. But I'm like, this is probably like one of the areas that I'm like the least experty on in terms of like how things are actually made. Like maybe if we had like someone on the call who was like, yes, I work in VFX or whatever, and they'd be like, actually it's groundbreaking the way they shot the vomit scene or whatever.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm no expert either, but I do agree that The Conjuring has like an element of, I don't know, it's like scaled back a bit and it feels realer, which is more my style of horror anyway. I do agree with you that there's some like really nice imagery in Insidious, including them going into the further and the imagery of just like the red door. Like it is kind of beautiful in a way. So I think like the cinematography is great, but yeah, there are some of the ghosts that I don't know, it feels like they're trick-or-treating at your door. You're like, wow, that's a great costume. But honestly, I'm not even a big fan of the red-faced demon. Like, I just always think to myself, how did that many people watch that movie and go like, well, don't you think this guy is going to be compared to Darth Maul for like the entirety of our franchise? Because it is just so like, it's different, but they could be brothers, and maybe they are. I'm sure there's a fan theory about it somewhere. So yeah, I think.
Or the demon is like a Star Wars fanboy.
Oh,
because he
could
paints,
be.
He like paints it on, right? Isn't that the implication? Like he's doing like costume makeup.
Yeah, he's doing
like,
drag.
There's like a deleted scene where he just constantly has the Phantom Menace playing. Like doing that as reference.
Man, yeah, that's the headcanon that I'm gonna go with. But yeah, I am much more like, I'm a big fan of 80s horror. And so like I love like really practical effect heavy movies. Like I love an Evil Dead type thing, or whatever, something like that. And so a lot of times modern movies, even if the effects look really great, which I do think they look really great in these movies, it's lacking like a charm to it for me. And so I do agree that James Wan does a good balance of both. And I think like in this day and age, people expect there to be a certain level of CGI, especially in supernatural movies. Like no offense to CGI artists, because they do amazing work. But I just love my horror with practical effects. It's pretty clear that Hannah and I both have decided that The Conjuring is the superior movie. So we agree with public opinion, which is fun. Before we wrap, are there any, like, for our last segment, are there any scene stealer scenes that like you want to talk about that we didn't touch on? Anything in The Conjuring specifically where you're like, this scene is so amazing and this is why you should watch that movie? Or do you feel like you sold everyone enough?
On The Conjuring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I was gonna say we never touched on the like probably the most famous jump scare in Insidious, which was when the demon like appears directly behind it, Patrick Wilson, which I think is like I think it deserves the recognition it got, because it does like it does completely take you by surprise, because it's just like a fairly casual conversation that like Patrick Wilson, Rose Byrne, and then Patrick Wilson's character's mum and like it just like it's a quick like sort of you're cutting back and forth and suddenly you cut back and it's just there. And it's such a striking face. I do think that like if I had to say that like Insidious did have anything over The Conjuring, I think that like scene does kind of stand the test of time as like a really good jump scare, I think. But
yeah,
I think
is that the first time we see the red-faced demon?
I think
too?
it is. I think
that's like the reveal, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it is
Okay.
so like, what the fuck? Like, why was Darth Maul suddenly behind that? What the hell was that? Yeah, it really really gets you. Yeah. But yeah, in terms of The Conjuring, I think, yeah, we covered, I think, like most of the sort of the standout like sort of moments. I'm trying to remember the nun scenes in The Conjuring now, because I often get like The Conjuring 1 and 2 like blur a little bit
Yeah, I
for
think
me.
those are in
Um,
two.
yeah,
Like
most
the
of those
scene
I
when
know.
she's in the study and the nun like lunges out. I think that's in two because that's the one that has a lot of those yeah, the picture thing.
Yeah,
I thought that was in two because that's the one that has like a lot of the Valak like
yeah,
symbolism in the background, which I think is really fun. Like the magnets on the fridge spell out Valak and
yeah,
all kinds of things in that movie, which
yeah.
is cool.
Which always gave me so many questions of like, who is leaving her those messages? Like, does the demon want her to know its name? Is it like, is she just
Yeah,
intuitively, is it like a sign from God? Like, but yeah.
good
um
question. Because yeah, usually the demon doesn't want you to know its name.
no, yeah, the name is what gives you power over it, and so I
Mhm.
think that, yeah, Valak would want it like hidden, but I don't know. But I kind of like that we don't know, and that it's like kind of left up to interpretation. But yeah, we're going off, track. Yeah, I think yeah, we probably did cover most of the sort of the like standout scenes. I think for me, like, I love the witch vomit scene. Like, I mean, I don't love it, but it is like, yeah, it is good. The bits involving that like the hanging tree, like where she originally like
Mm.
hung herself as well, and like I remember there's a scene where you suddenly see the feet like sort of dangling behind a character, which is also like a really good like scare, I think, as well. um
Yeah, that's classic.
yeah, and I love that house. Like, it is one of those, like, I don't know if I can't remember if it's like set in the same place as like the Amityville horror uh films often are, but it's a very very similar style of house as well, which is like synonymous with like mid-century like American gothic like haunting like sort of stuff as well. It's like a really good like kind of, I don't want to be like, oh, the house is a character too, but it kind of is like.
But actually, yeah, no, that's interesting that you think of it like that. I guess I think of it like that too. But the real Conjuring house looks nothing like the one in the movie. The one in the movie is like much bigger and gorgeous. The Conjuring house, it's a very old house, and I know they have issues with like people trying to like, come onto their property,
Oh,
and
of course, yeah.
they all do. But yeah, no, I think we cover. I mean, obviously, we have to talk about real quick Hide and Clap from The Conjuring. Like, I always think that's so interesting because I
Yeah.
don't like know what that is. I'm like, has anyone played Hide and Clap ever? Like, that's not.
Oh, I just assumed maybe it was like an American thing, and I
No.
like the Brit, but okay.
No, I mean, not to my knowledge. I've never known anyone in America to play Hide and Clap. Maybe it's like their weird families, like, like a weird family game. But I think that scene is like very iconic. It was used in like the marketing and trailers a lot of her, in the dark with the light up and the hands. I kind of think it's a little silly now, but I think the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, it's pretty good spookery. But I think wrapping our conversation of The Conjuring on Hide and Clap is probably the place to end it. I mean, so Hannah, before we go, is there anything that you want to plug where people can find your writing?
Oh, yes, I do have a Substack which I update when I remember to update it / when I have time, called Essays Without a Home, which is like I started it as like sort of a place where I would just like publish things like pieces about like sort of film and TV that I either just thought like wouldn't get published anywhere else, or I'd like pitched it elsewhere and like no one was picking it up, and so I was like, you know what, I'll just publish it all myself. And like, but these days I do just like put stuff on there like immediately, like rather than being like, this didn't find a home anywhere. So the name is a little bit of a lie now, but I stuck with it because it. But yeah, I write about just film and TV that I'm interested in. There's no like sort of set theme exactly. It's just like this is the stuff I'm watching. I do have a bit of a thing where I quite like watching like a group of movies and then seeing if there's like a common way that I can like thread them
Ooh, fun.
together. That's about as like close as like a USP that I can. I'm really selling it very well. It's just random bits of writing that have no real theme. Come and give them all a read. But yeah.
Oh, that sounds fun. And I know you're always going to screenings and you're always doing something. So I'm sure there's stuff on new content there too, stuff that's coming out. So
Yes, there is. Yeah. I will be seeing speaking of horror films, I'll be seeing Hokum next week, which I'm excited for / terrified.
Yeah, let me know how that is. I've
Yeah.
heard good things so far.
Yeah, it like I think the trailers do a really good job at really just like selling the vibe of it and telling you nothing about the story well, which is what trailers should do. But yeah, we all have issues with trailers, I'm sure. But yeah,
Cool.
Hopefully I'll have something up on that film that might be interesting to horror nerds listening / watching.
Yeah, very cool. So just to recap, the more popular movie according to audiences is The Conjuring. Do Hannah and I agree? We do. We both agree this time. And it was, kind of a runaway. So you heard it here. The Conjuring is the better movie. Sorry, Insidious. Sorry, James Wan. We still love you. However, like I like to say, nobody is right. Nobody is wrong. It is just movies. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you. Bye.